Among friends and acquaintances there were two opposing views of Patrick. Some saw him as a kind-hearted man you could always count on. Others considered him a whim who couldn't say no and let people walk all over him. Perhaps both perspectives held some truth. Regardless, Patrick's circle deeply loved and respected him, particularly because he never refused a request, especially from those close to him. Yet Patrick himself wasn't fond of this trait, as it had caused him trouble in the past. From childhood, he had been gentle and timid. Rather than teaching him to stand up for himself, his family constantly pressured him, a factor that shaped his entire life. He grew so accustomed to following his parents' will that he gradually lost the ability to make independent decisions, finding it easier to simply agree with them. Under this parental influence, he made choices that contradicted his dreams and vision of a happy future. Music had been Patrick's passion since childhood, and he showed remarkable talent in it. At just 6 years old, he quickly learned guitar from the older neighbourhood boys and asked to attend music school. His parents readily agreed, believing that artistic pursuits benefited a child's overall development. His mother had read somewhere that music enhanced brain development, and his father concurred, but they overlooked that, for their son, this was more than just a hobby. Perhaps they noticed his eyes lighting up when he played, but they dismissed it as a childhood phase. But for Patrick, music became his life's calling. Year after year, he immersed himself deeper into musical studies, becoming one of the top students at the music school. He performed in concerts, won awards in various competitions, and even formed a rock band with 2 classmates. He composed his own music and lyrics, earning high praise from both peers and teachers. Everyone around him supported his dream of performing and believed in his future success. Everyone except his family. When university application time arrived, Patrick's heart was set on the conservatory. He knew exactly what he wanted, had researched everything thoroughly, and had been preparing for quite some time. But when he shared his decision with his parents, he met unexpected opposition. His mother nearly fainted, as if he'd announced something terrible. After giving his wife heart medication and helping her lie down, his father sternly confronted him. "What's this about, Patrick? The conservatory? This won't do." "Dad, I don't understand why you and Mum are so upset. You've always known I love music. I've never hidden my desire to pursue a career in performing." "Yes, and we've encouraged it as a hobby. But notice, a hobby, not a profession." "Why not? Many people make their living in the arts." "Let others do what they want. You're different. You must continue the family dynasty. Your grandfather was a teacher, your mother and I are teachers. You have to honour this tradition." "But Dad," Patrick tried to object. "I don't want to hear it. If you like music, keep it as a hobby. No one limits you in this, but only in your spare time, because you're going to be a physics teacher. End of story." Inwardly, Patrick rebelled. His head was filled with convincing arguments in his defence. He even contemplated deceiving his parents, perhaps deliberately failing the entrance exams to the university while secretly applying to the conservatory. But these remained just thoughts and words. In reality, Patrick couldn't stand up to his mother and father. As the son of powerful and authoritarian parents, he had been conditioned since childhood to obey them unconditionally. He lacked the inner strength, that firmness of spirit that would have allowed him to forge his own path against the odds. Deep in his soul lurked the fear of failure. After all, art was an unpredictable field, while teaching offered security and stability. By age 35, Patrick had secured a stable, if unloved, position that he performed dutifully but without passion. Though respected by students and colleagues at the large university where he taught, happiness eluded him. It felt as if he were living someone else's life, one imposed upon him. This feeling became unbearable after losing his parents. When his mother passed away, followed shortly by his father, Patrick felt betrayed. Who would he answer to now? Who would take pride in his achievements? Everything seemed to have lost its purpose. Now, when he finally had no one to answer to, and the path to his dreams lay open, he was paralysed by fear of change. For years, Patrick lived in constant depression, disappointed in himself. He berated himself for lacking the courage to pursue his dreams in youth, and loathed his current inability to make changes. The inner turmoil poisoned his personal life, which was practically non-existent. His relationships with women invariably failed. Patrick expected his beloved to fill the void in his life and bring him peace. But this never happened. Each new romance ended in disappointment. Love brought no healing. This pattern continued until he met Marcia at his friend's birthday party. Though not a striking beauty, she was pretty in an ordinary way, like countless other women. Yet she possessed something that captivated men and caught Patrick's attention. Marcia was among those who embraced life fully and seized every opportunity. Ambitious and determined, she never stood still. She set bold goals and pursued them confidently. Unafraid of experiments, she wouldn't hesitate to start anew. Patrick fell in love with her courage and enthusiasm, qualities he lacked himself. He felt as if he'd finally found his missing half, the piece that would make his life complete, vibrant and harmonious. While Patrick fell for Marcia almost instantly, she viewed him differently. He wasn't quite her type. She preferred confident, successful men, yet she also enjoyed being admired, worshipped and cherished. That's what drew her to Patrick. True, he wasn't wealthy or particularly ambitious. He would likely remain in his university department until retirement, achieving nothing more. Such a man couldn't shower her with diamonds, luxury cars, or Maldives vacations. Though Marcia had always dreamed of such devotion, she remained practical. She understood that wealthy suitors wouldn't be falling at her feet, begging for her love. In fact, many of the less wealthy men she had met before were not particularly gallant, just pompous, arrogant, selfish creatures who demanded attention but offered nothing in return, chasing after every skirt they saw. No, with such men one couldn't build family happiness. But with someone like Patrick it seemed possible. Though he didn't grab stars from the sky, he could become a reliable, loving husband. Someone to lean on, and perhaps even wrap around her finger. Marcia decided that while Patrick wasn't the most impressive catch, he was a convenient match she shouldn't pass up. Still, she didn't dive headfirst into the relationship, choosing instead to make him work a bit for her attention. He had to pursue her, naturally. When Patrick was nearly ready to give up, she finally showed him interest. He was absolutely ecstatic. Afraid to lose such a treasure, he wasted no time with marriage. After only 6 months together, he proposed and arranged a gorgeous wedding, spending the lion's share of his savings on it. Had he had more money, he would have spent even more, believing Marcia deserved the very best. From this marriage, Marcia essentially got everything she'd hoped for. From her perspective, Patrick turned out to be the perfect spouse, loving, caring and quiet. Patrick himself, however, had slightly different expectations of married life. While he knew whom he was marrying, he'd still hoped for at least some domestic comfort, but Marcia turned out to be a poor homemaker, or rather, none. She barely did anything at home, and Patrick couldn't bring himself to complain. He felt he had no moral right since his wife earned more and contributed more to their budget. The young family wasn't poor, but for Marcia it was never enough. Her obsession with money overshadowed everything else, including love and marriage. The ambitious careerist reacted harshly when her spouse brought up children. "Marcia, don't you think it's time to think about extending our family?" "What do you mean, Patrick? Do you want my mum to move in with us? I'm glad you love your mother-in-law so much, but I doubt that's necessary." "What's your mum got to do with it? I'm talking about having a baby. Why would you want a baby all of a sudden? Where did that come from?" "What do you mean, where from? Isn't that why people start families? Isn't having kids the natural progression of a relationship?" "I don't know about anyone else, but I'm not planning on that anytime soon." "But why?" "Of course you men can't understand what it's like for a woman to put her life on hold for at least a year. Do you realize how many opportunities I'll miss during maternity leave? I'll never make up for that lost time." "But isn't motherhood more important than career opportunities? Isn't becoming a mother a woman's main purpose?" "Patrick, let's end this pointless conversation. I understand you'd like to keep me at home, but that won't happen. As a woman, I alone decide when, or if, to have children. I'm sorry, but you don't get the final say in this." Patrick had no counter to such arguments. He couldn't force his wife to stay home, have children, and manage the household. After all, when he had proposed, he'd known perfectly well she wasn't a model housewife. What could he do but accept the consequences of his choice? But soon events unfolded that Patrick couldn't ignore, or rather, a situation that had been developing for some time. The naive and trusting man never imagined his beloved wife would go so far in her career ambitions. Marcia already spent precious little time at home, but after she left her old job for a more promising position, Patrick began to fear he'd forget what his wife looked like. She worked nearly every weekend and often stayed late. A few times she even came home in the morning. After several sleepless nights of worry and suspicion, even someone as calm and patient as Patrick grew indignant. "Marcia, what kind of work is this? What could you possibly do at the office at night?" "Patrick, am I imagining things, or are you making inappropriate insinuations? Tell me directly, what are you accusing me of?" "I don't know what to think. What would you think if I worked nights and only came home in the morning?" "I'd assume you were busy with work, but I wouldn't accuse you of anything." "What business could there be at such hours when normal people are sleeping in their beds next to their spouses?" "I have to work overtime to prove myself to my bosses." "Yesterday we had an online negotiation with the Australians. You know about the time difference, right?" "Why are you doing this one? Isn't there anyone else?" "Because the deputy director position is about to become vacant, and I'm working my ass off to get that job instead of someone else. I'm doing this for us, for our future children, so we can have everything we need, while you sit in your department earning pennies, yet dare to reproach me." Patrick strongly disagreed about earning pennies. His salary was excellent, enough to live on comfortably, though compared to his wife's earnings, it was indeed modest. Marcia had always been attracted to luxury and never hid it. Looking back, Patrick understood perfectly whom he had married. But what had he expected? That Marcia would suddenly transform into a model housewife? That she would abandon her career ambitions and agree to live paycheck to paycheck? Patrick spent several days deep in thought. The more he reflected, the more he realized his mistake. His recent anger towards his wife had transformed into guilt. Why had he confronted her with foolish questions and accusations? How dare he suspect her of anything? For about 2 weeks, he tried to earn his wife's forgiveness. He did everything to please her, bought flowers and gifts, ordered her favorite sushi from the nearby restaurant, paid compliments, showed interest in her work. But nothing worked. Marcia maintained her hurt expression and barely spoke to her husband. Marcia knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to cultivate Patrick's guilt and eventually use the situation to her advantage. Though she hadn't yet decided what to ask of her spouse, she knew she'd think of something. However, Marcia's game backfired, and became her own trap. Despite her cunning and calculations, she failed to foresee certain possibilities that she should have. Confident that her husband was faithfully waiting at home, she carried on her affairs without worry. Meanwhile, Patrick, desperate to earn her forgiveness and restore harmony at home, planned another surprise. He decided to meet Marcia after work and take her somewhere fun, perhaps to a nightclub. Though he didn't particularly enjoy such places, he was willing to endure some discomfort for his beloved wife, who had always loved crowded, lively venues. Since he didn't know exactly when she would finish work, he bought a bouquet of roses, parked near her office and waited. The wait proved lengthy. He sat in his car for 2 hours until his legs grew stiff and he needed to stretch. He paced back and forth for 40 minutes, chilled to the bone. How long could she work? What could possibly take this long? Everyone else had gone home hours ago. All the building's windows were dark except for one in the corner of the first floor. Patrick watched it, waiting for the light to go out. Though not entirely certain, he believed this was his wife's office, where supposedly strict, soulless bosses were exploiting her. Finally, he decided to approach the window for a closer look. Perhaps he could see if they were wrapping up or still working. Without hesitation, Patrick approached the building and peered through the window. Despite the lowered blinds, they didn't completely cover the glass. The gap at the bottom was just a few centimeters, but it was enough to reveal everything inside, though perhaps Patrick would have preferred never to witness it. The scene destroyed his entire life, shattering all illusions of a happy family and hopes for the future. What did Patrick see in the office? The atmosphere was decidedly not professional. An uncorked wine bottle stood on the table, with glasses, fruits, sweets, and other romantic dinner accompaniments. Only candles were missing from the scene. At the table sat an overweight, balding, generally unpleasant-looking man in his early 40s. On his lap sat Marcia, her blouse half unbuttoned. The man was apparently telling jokes, and Marcia laughed crudely before throwing himself into his arms and kissing him. The revolting scene made Patrick vomit. He wanted to flee, but shock paralyzed his legs. He might have remained frozen there if a security guard hadn't emerged from the building, likely having spotted the suspicious figure on security cameras, peering through office windows. Anyway, thanks to the guard's foul language, Patrick came out of his stupor and ran away, as if he really was some criminal who had been caught in the act. He didn't even remember how he got home. Only one thought consumed him. I wish she'd never come back at all. But Marcia was in no hurry to come back. She appeared the next morning as if nothing had happened, humming a cheerful tune. It was 6:30, a time when Patrick was usually still asleep. When she entered the dark living room, the woman nearly screamed at the sight of a man's silhouette on the sofa. She thought a burglar had broken in. Who else would be sitting there in the semi-darkness, still wearing a hat and jacket? Marcia tried to retreat, but finding the light switch on the wall, flipped it on and sighed with relief. There sat not some dangerous criminal, but her mild-mannered husband. Marcia's relief lasted only a moment before tension gripped her again. Why was Patrick sitting in the living room instead of sleeping? Why was Patrick sitting in the living room instead of sleeping? Why was he in his street clothes? And why was he looking at her with such judgment and disappointment in his eyes? An unsettling feeling crept over her. Deep down she knew exactly what had happened, but pushed the thought away. Maintaining perfect composure and forcing a casual tone, she broke the silence. Patrick, why are you up so early? And why are you dressed? Are you going somewhere? No, I'm not going. I've just returned, actually. Haven't even had an opportunity to undress or go to bed. How interesting. Where were you? And why do you look so strange? Has something happened? Yes, Marcia, something has happened. To us. And apparently it happened long ago. Patrick, I don't understand. Speak plainly. Stop being cryptic and scaring me. Stop pretending you don't understand. I saw you. What do you mean? You saw me. Saw me where? Exactly what I said. I've had the privilege of seeing firsthand why you work late and how you get your promotions. What? You're spying on me? How dare you? Enough, Marcia. You've lost the right to make a fool of me or reproach me for anything. Pack your things and leave. Quietly, without drama. We're getting divorced immediately. Wait. Patrick, don't be hasty. Don't say things you'll regret. I don't know what you saw or heard, but you've misunderstood. Raymond and I were negotiating with the Australians until morning. Stop lying. What Australians? Since when does negotiating require sitting in your boss's lap and kissing him? Is this some new Australian's business protocol I'm unaware of? No, you don't understand. He felt ill. I was giving first aid. Enough, Marcia. Don't degrade yourself further. By noon, I want you and your belongings gone. Go to your mother's or go to your Raymond. I no longer care. Patrick, please, forgive me. Give me another chance. At these words, Marcia rushed towards her husband like a melodrama heroine. She tried to throw herself at his neck, but stopped short, terrified by his expression. She had never seen him like this before. The gentle, harmless man she knew had vanished, replaced by a stranger consumed with rage. Marcia backed away, frightened. For a moment she feared he might strike her. His fists were clenched, but Patrick didn't lay a finger on his unfaithful wife. He gave her one final scorching look before bolting from the apartment, not even slamming the door. He strode down the street with long, quick steps, mindless of his direction. It didn't matter where he went. He just couldn't stay still. Patrick needed to release his anger, to let off steam, and found no better way than pacing the city streets. At least it helped him temporarily escape his thoughts of how stupid and blind he'd been, of how much time he'd wasted on this unworthy woman, and most painful of all, thoughts of his own weakness and spinelessness. Even now, he couldn't truly stand up for himself. He had no words for Marcia. He had no words for Marcia that would strike her down and make her die of shame. He lacked the courage to confront Raymond and give him a well-deserved punch. All that remained was to suffer in silence. Meanwhile, in her husband's apartment, Marcia was beginning to come to her senses. Initially, she panicked. After all, despite everything, she did love Patrick, to some degree, though not deeply. And she didn't want to lose such a convenient husband who tolerated her whims and fulfilled her every desire. Moreover, Marcia felt humiliated by being caught in the act. Being discovered while cheating was degrading. It would tarnish her reputation and weaken her position in the divorce. But what position was there to worry about? She had no claim to Patrick's pre-marital apartment, and she had no use for his old car. As Marcia reflected, she realized that perhaps everything had happened for the best. With Patrick, she had stability and security. He was her safety net, but she had long felt bored and constrained. Marcia had known it was time to leave her comfort zone, yet she couldn't find a convincing reason to leave her husband. He was too perfect, too sinless, an angel in the flesh. His very correctness and honesty irritated Marcia the most. Perhaps she needed to experience such drama to break free from this promising yet stifling marriage and move forward. And Marcia certainly had somewhere to go. Her affair with her boss Raymond had been going on for 6 months. It wasn't a crude attempt at career advancement. With her intelligence, she could have earned a leadership position on merit alone. It was something else entirely. Raymond was precisely the man Marcia had always dreamed of. Though not as handsome or well-mannered as Patrick, he had money, connections and opportunities. Her lover showered her with luxury and promised her the world. The life Marcia had always wanted was now within reach. The relationship with Raymond had begun shortly after she started her new job. Curiously, Marcia never saw it as betrayal. She felt no guilt. To her, the intimate relationship with her boss was simply a means to achieve her career and financial goals. Her mind was so clouded by self-interest that she didn't see anything wrong with her behaviour. She couldn't even understand why Patrick had reacted so strongly. Marcia packed her belongings with indifference while planning her next moves. Though not yet officially divorced from Patrick, she was already scheming how to marry Raymond. Marcia was convinced she had her boss wrapped around her finger. He had been divorced for a year and had no obligations. Nothing stood in the way of remarriage. She just needed to nudge him in that direction. Of course, Marcia wouldn't tell her lover about being caught. She believed that an abandoned woman lost all appeal to men. So she decided to modify the truth. Leaving her half-packed suitcase in the middle of the living room, she went to Raymond's home. He was visibly surprised to find his mistress at his doorstep, mere hours after they'd parted. "Marcia, what are you doing here?" "Raymond, I couldn't help myself. I did something crazy and ruined my marriage. But I have absolutely no regrets. We love each other, and after last night I suddenly realized I don't want to hide any more. Can you believe it? I told my husband about us. I told him I was in love with another man, and I'm filing for divorce." "Why would you do that?" "But don't we love each other? You're free. I'm free now, and I don't have to hide from anyone. There's nothing stopping us from being together now, Raymond. I'm so happy." "Well, it's sudden. I didn't expect it. We'll have to talk it over." Raymond's reaction upset Marcia. After all, he had pursued her so ardently, had admired her so much. Where had all that passion gone? He wasn't acting like a man eager to rush to the registry office. His eyes showed surprise, panic, and even a touch of discomfort. Marcia wouldn't have been surprised if he had thrown her out immediately and cut her from his life entirely. However, Raymond, though clearly not ready for marriage or a serious relationship, wasn't cruel. While he wouldn't let her move in, he didn't abandon her either. Instead, he rented her an apartment near the office, convenient for both work and their dates. At first, Marcia regularly hinted about making their relationship official. Though he never directly refused, his evasive responses made it clear he had no intention of remarrying. This was understandable. His previous divorce had been brutal, with his ex-wife dragging him through the courts to claim as much property as possible. He was likely terrified of repeating that experience. When Raymond began responding aggressively to her hints about marriage, Marcia decided to back off. What would marriage give her that she didn't have already? Perhaps life was simpler without it. For 2 years, Marcia lived what seemed like a fairy tale. She achieved her dream of a management position, one she'd worked so hard for. Raymond showered her with gifts, treated her to the finest restaurants, and took her on international trips. Recently, he'd even made her a co-owner of the firm, a full business partner, yet she couldn't say she was completely happy. Only now did she realize that money and career weren't everything. Surprisingly, she found herself missing Patrick, or rather, his way of treating her. Though her ex-husband hadn't amounted to much in her eyes, he had treated her with genuine respect and devotion, practically carrying her on his hands. With him, she had truly felt like a queen. With Raymond, That feeling was hollow. Yet she had everything material she could dream of. But emotionally something was missing. She felt neglected, as if Raymond's heart was somewhere else, as if she were merely a beautiful toy rather than his life partner. However, Marcia would have preferred any status in the man's life to what fate, or rather her lover, for whom she had destroyed her marriage, was preparing for her. Packing for another romantic trip to Paris, she had no idea her life was about to change dramatically, her golden carriage turning into a pumpkin. She was excited about the trip, especially since now she had new leverage she hoped would finally convince Raymond to marry her. She planned to reveal her trump card in Paris, the city of love, hoping the romantic atmosphere would inspire a proposal. But it wasn't meant to be. The very day she planned to share her news, she woke up alone in their room. She was surprised to find Raymond missing. On vacation, he usually slept until noon. Where could he have gone? Marcia wondered, yawning as she rolled over and went back to sleep. When she woke again to find him still absent, worry began to set in. His phone was disconnected, and Marcia went to the reception to inquire about his whereabouts. Perhaps he'd gone to the gym or spa. The employee's response shocked her. Raymond had checked out. In broken French, Marcia tried to confirm this couldn't be true. How could he have checked out? That's impossible. The guest in room 545 checked out around 6 this morning. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe he just went somewhere else for a while. No, the gentleman asked me to call him a cab to the airport. Something must have happened at work, or he wouldn't have left. Okay, then I'm checking out too. I'll need a cab. Whatever you say. Will you be paying the bill in cash or by card? I'm sorry. What bills are you talking about? Didn't the gentleman pay? No, he said his companion would pay. Marcia was shocked, especially about the bill. She had never paid for anything, living on Raymond's money, so she hadn't even considered the cost. She felt a pang of self-pity for spending her money, but there was no choice. She had to pay. The young woman could hardly believe this was really happening. She clung to hope that there had been some mistake, that the incompetent receptionist had misunderstood. But upon returning to the room and finding Raymond's things gone, Marcia had to accept the truth. Though the situation made her nervous, there was no panic in her soul, only mild anxiety. She couldn't imagine that Raymond had simply abandoned her. Since he had interrupted their vacation so urgently and forgotten to pay the bill, she assumed some emergency must have occurred. Yet she reasoned it couldn't be too serious, or he would have woken her to explain. After all, Marcia was his right hand, his closest confidant. She had no idea how many shocking discoveries awaited her return home. The first surprise came at her rented apartment. Her expensive designer clothes lay crumpled in bags, unceremoniously dumped in the entrance. Her key wouldn't work in the lock, which had clearly been changed. Fuming, Marcia called the landlord repeatedly, until he finally answered on the 4th try. "Why are you harassing me with calls?" he demanded. "I'm harassing you. How dare you throw out my belongings? Do you know they're worth more than this whole place? And why can't I get in?" "Stop shouting and being rude. Only paying tenants get to use the door. No rent, no apartment. Leave. And I'm going to find a proper tenant." "Just wait until my man hears about this. He'll set you straight." "Go ahead, tell him. Make sure he brings 3 months' back rent when he comes. Otherwise, I'll take you both to court. I'm not running a charity." Marcia hurled a few choice words at the landlord before hanging up. His words made no sense to her. Raymond couldn't have missed the rent payments. He was always meticulous about such things. But with his phone still off, she couldn't verify anything. The woman headed to the office, certain she'd find her lover there. Instead, she found police conducting a search. Everything after that became a blur. Marcia struggled to comprehend what the uniformed officers were saying. According to them, Raymond had taken out massive loans, accumulated staggering debts, and fled to South America with his ex-wife, having emptied both his personal and company accounts. Now, Marcia, as co-owner, would have to repay everything, or face trial and likely imprisonment. The shock left her mind reeling. Her only coherent thought was to run, but she had nowhere to go. To avoid prison, Marcia surrendered all her savings, a considerable sum, but not enough. She had to sell her car, jewellery, and even her mother's apartment, leaving the older woman without a home in her twilight years. Worse still, Marcia was pregnant. This was the news she'd planned to share with her lover in Paris. She'd built such dreams around it, imagining marriage and happiness. Now she sat empty-handed, no money, no job, no husband, no property. Though the unborn child bore no blame, she already felt hatred toward it. Now Marcia, who had recently lived an enviable life, sat in the shabby kitchen of a cramped apartment with dated furnishings, which she and her mother rented with their last funds. Trapped in this seemingly hopeless situation, her thoughts turned to Patrick. How was he? Had he healed from her betrayal? Found someone new? 2 years after their divorce, Marcia wondered if perhaps not all was lost, if her ex-husband might still love her and forgive her sins. Patrick had taken the divorce far harder than Marcia imagined. The betrayal had plunged him into deep depression. Even work brought no solace or distraction. He looked so unwell that his superiors granted him unpaid leave, despite the challenges of finding a mid-year replacement. But he was barely functioning anyway. His colleagues offered sympathetic advice, drawing from personal experience or stories of others who had weathered similar family crises. They all insisted he use his leave wisely, get away somewhere to clear his head and escape his troubles. Patrick pretended to listen, nodding in agreement, but did something entirely different. Instead of seeking a change of scenery, he locked himself in the apartment, where everything reminded him of Marcia, where her abandoned possessions lay scattered, things she deemed unnecessary in her new life. If not for a kind elderly neighbour, once a friend of his late parents, who brought him food, he might have starved to death. The old woman's heart ached for her young neighbour, whom she'd watched grow up before her eyes. She tried to bring him to his senses. "What are you doing, Patrick? You don't eat, you don't drink, you don't work, you don't go outside." "Leave me alone, Mrs. Barris. Go home and don't come back. Let me die in peace." "What's there to die for? You're young, healthy, with an apartment and a job. Are you really going to waste away here because of some worthless woman?" "Don't talk about her like that. She's still my wife, though ex." "What kind of wife is she? Just a name. She's nothing but a tramp. It's not you who should suffer. She should be ashamed for losing such a man. Mark my words, she'll come crawling back on her knees." Patrick only smirked ironically at his concerned neighbour's words, but the elderly woman persisted. Every day Mrs. Barris would go on with her admonitions to Patrick, and eventually her efforts bore fruit. One morning he woke up in an entirely different mood. The previous evening he'd gone to bed feeling worthless, but now his soul burned with anger. Why should he suffer for someone so shameless? Had he wronged her? Hadn't he carried her in his arms? Hadn't he indulged her every whim? No, this ungrateful woman wasn't even worth thinking about. With these thoughts, Patrick leaped out of bed and rushed to the kitchen. Grabbing trash bags from the closet, he darted around the apartment, collecting everything that belonged to Marcia or reminded him of her. Her makeup bag, an unfinished romance novel, bottles of expensive yet cloying perfume, a statue they'd bought on vacation. By noon, Patrick had already taken 5 full bags to the trash, but he wasn't finished. He decided to continue purging the apartment, then renovate it, so nothing would remind him of his ex-wife or any past disappointments. Mrs. Barris was a lonely pensioner bored at home. Thus, she decided to help her young neighbour, though, truthfully, she felt sorry seeing so many good things discarded. She managed to rescue a bottle of Marcia's expensive shampoo and her brand handbag from their journey to the trash. The thought of all the valuable items being thrown away made the elderly woman's blood pressure rise. She decided to take control of the entire process to ensure nothing else expensive or beautiful went to waste. At first, Mrs. Barris merely supervised quietly, but as she grew comfortable, she began acting like the mistress of the house, searching through closets, under beds, and in various hiding places. So absorbed was she in this task that she forgot her aching legs and twisted back. With surprising agility for her age, she climbed a stepladder and retrieved a large old suitcase from the mezzanine. Upon opening it, Mrs. Barris felt disappointed. Nothing worth salvaging inside. "Patrick, we can throw out this suitcase without even looking. It's just junk." "What is it, Mrs. Barris? Let me see." "Just some ancient papers." "This isn't junk. It's treasure. Give it back. You can't throw this away, not under any circumstances." He's a really strange man, she thought. He'd thrown away expensive French perfume and silk scarves, yet here he was, pining over old papers. He must have truly lost his mind after the divorce. He was completely absorbed in reverently turning the pages of old, yellowed notebooks filled with scrawled handwriting. Back in his school days, he'd written down songs he had composed, along with their guitar chords. When he'd been forced to abandon his dreams of a musical future, he had angrily stashed these notebooks away somewhere and forgotten about them. He had assumed that they were lost during various apartment renovations and reorganizations. But his mother had preserved them, carefully storing them in a suitcase alongside his school diaries and first notebooks, precious memories of her son. For the next few days, Patrick again remained housebound. Once more, he forgot about food and sleep, but this time not from grief. From morning until evening, he sat hunched over his notebooks, reading, rereading, correcting, and rewriting. Mrs. Barris watched her neighbour with growing concern, genuinely worried about his mental health. When the courier arrived with the guitar from the online store, the woman delivered her verdict. "Well, that's it, Patrick. You've finally lost your mind." "What makes you think that, Mrs. Barris?" "Not only do you spend all day scribbling in those notebooks, but now you've brought this contraption into the house. What do you need it for? To keep me awake at all hours?" "I've been remembering my youth. I loved music so much, wrote songs, dreamed of performing on stage. How could I have known I'd end up such a failure? That I'd waste my life at a job I hated, only to have my wife leave me for another man." "Enough wallowing. Play your guitar if it helps, but don't stay up too late, or we'll have problems." "Don't worry, Mrs. Barris. I'll probably return the guitar tomorrow and throw out these notebooks. Who needs these songs now? My train has left the station." Patrick sighed heavily and turned to face the window. The elderly neighbour, at a loss for words of comfort, sat quietly for a moment before deciding to leave him alone with his thoughts. She had almost crossed the threshold when she suddenly tapped her forehead, remembering something. She returned to the living room and said, "Listen, Patrick, there are these people who make videos and post them on the internet. You mean bloggers? Yes, that's it, bloggers. I don't watch such nonsense myself, but my friend has gone completely crazy in her old age. She watches them all day and keeps sending them to me. It's so annoying. I don't know how to stop her without hurting her feelings. But here's what I'm thinking. Why don't you try doing what those bloggers do? Sing your songs and put them online. Let people listen. Come on, it's not that simple. I'd probably just get mocked. Well, I've pitched the idea. Do what you want. But remember, it's better to regret what you've done than what you haven't done. When Mrs. Barris left, Patrick smiled and shook his head sceptically. Though touched by his elderly neighbour's concern, he considered her suggestion unrealistic. First, simply posting videos online wasn't enough. You needed to handle promotion and advertising, things he knew nothing about. Second, he was convinced no one would like his music or songs. People would laugh, and if Marcia saw it, that would be unbearable. No, he'd endured enough hardship. He wouldn't humiliate himself. Having mentally dismissed the idea, Patrick finished his coffee and went to bed. Sleep, however, proved elusive. He tossed and turned all night, blaming his insomnia on that last cup of coffee. He had sworn countless times not to drink coffee at night, yet here he was. But of course, coffee wasn't the real culprit. It was Mrs. Barris's fault for planting the idea of pursuing music again. Who had asked for her opinion? He had been living quietly, bothering no one, peacefully nursing his unfulfilled dreams. Then this progressive old lady had to come along and stir up his soul. Until dawn, Patrick invented reasons why he shouldn't pursue music or share it online. But if he was honest, all his arguments were weak, mere excuses masking his fear, laziness, and insecurity. The truth was, Patrick no longer had strict parents to answer to, no one to blame for his broken dreams. Years ago, he could have shown backbone and stood his ground, but he hadn't. Now, his cowardice and indecision were his alone to own. If he didn't try now, he'd spend the rest of his life regretting it. Only when daylight began creeping in did Patrick finally end his internal debate and decide to try. At last, he could sleep. While night had brought doubt, morning brought fierce enthusiasm. He wanted to start immediately, though he wasn't sure where to begin. He propped his phone against a sugar bowl, played and sang one verse. The result disappointed him. Years without practice had left his hands stiff and his voice rusty. Then there were the technical challenges, sound quality, lighting, video production, and more. For a moment his spirits sank, but he quickly rallied. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he overcame his weakness and self-doubt. He spent a month preparing to shoot and post his first proper video. He practiced constantly, polishing his compositions while learning about video production. He studied blogging and online promotion. Though nervous, he didn't expect success. He mentally prepared for failure, deciding in advance not to let it devastate him. The main thing is that he finally tried, and this topic would be closed forever. Meanwhile, Mrs. Barris, who had been supporting Patrick morally and helping him around the house all this time, remained optimistic. She was certain that success awaited her neighbour. She was the first to like and write an enthusiastic comment on his video. She even asked her tech-savvy friend, the one who had taught her about bloggers, for help, though it turned out to be unnecessary. Patrick's video reached hundreds of views on the first day, and by the next day the count had risen to thousands. While there was some criticism, the vast majority of viewers loved the song, as did its performer. The success caught Patrick off guard, leaving him unsure how to proceed. Mrs. Barris insisted he must continue, And he didn't argue. He no longer dwelled on his job change or divorce. There was no time for suffering. All his spare time went to his newfound passion. Soon he had amassed quite a following. The blog even started generating some income, modest at first, but it was just the beginning. Before long, Patrick was performing at corporate events and club concerts. His songs made it to radio airplay. He had become something of a local celebrity. His popularity grew so much that he finally resigned from his unfulfilling job to pursue music full-time, just as he had dreamed of in childhood. Now that his life was finally improving, seeing Marcia was the last thing he wanted. But the selfish, calculating woman gave little thought to her former husband's feelings. She had her own problems to solve. When Marcia inquired about Patrick, she felt slightly offended. She had expected her abandoned spouse to be completely devastated without her. Instead, he had flourished. His success wounded Marcia's ego, yet she saw how this situation could work in her favour. After all, she was jobless. Who could hire a pregnant woman? She was content knowing her ex-spouse would support both her and the future child. She had planned everything meticulously, even considering he might reject her. Marcia avoided calling Patrick, fearing he might ignore her. She decided a face-to-face meeting would be better. Surely then he couldn't resist her. Having discovered which bar her ex-husband was performing at, Marcia dressed up and arrived near the end of his concert. Patrick was shocked to see her, initially assuming she had come with her lover. Therefore, he was surprised to realize she had come alone, and apparently for him. Marcia approached Patrick with a radiant smile, as if nothing had happened. She moved to hug and kiss his cheek, but stopped when she saw him instinctively recoil. "Hello, Patrick. I'm so glad to see you. I can't believe that we haven't seen you for 2 whole years. You've changed so much in that time." "Have I?" "Yes," Marcia nodded with a gentle smile. "And you haven't changed at all." Patrick blurted out the first thought that came to his mind. "I hope it's a compliment to my blooming appearance and not some kind of tease." "Okay, Marcia. I don't have time to talk to you, and someone's probably waiting for you." "No, he isn't. Nobody's waiting for me." "You've already started clubbing on your own? What does your boyfriend think of that?" "Nothing. He's not my boyfriend anymore. I left him, and it's all for the best." "Well, good luck to you. I gotta go," Patrick said and turned to leave. "Oh, wait a minute. Where are you trying to run off to? I came to see you on purpose." "Me?" "Yes. We need to have a serious talk." Actually, Patrick didn't want to talk to Marcia, expecting nothing good from her. Common sense told him to turn around and leave, but curiosity won out. He wondered what could have happened to make the proud and arrogant Marcia, who had always looked down on him, come crawling back, just as Mrs. Barris had predicted. So Patrick invited his ex-wife to a vacant table and looked at her questioningly. He noticed her nervous demeanour. She tried hard to maintain composure, but was visibly anxious. "Marcia, if you came to sit in silence, I have absolutely no time." "You've become so busy. Not like before." "I don't have the slightest desire to reminisce about what used to be. Tell me why you're here, and we'll go our separate ways." "I've been thinking about the old days a lot lately, and I don't want to run off in different directions." "What are you implying?" "Why don't we try starting over?" "I knew this conversation wouldn't lead to anything good," said Patrick, getting up. "Wait, Patrick, don't jump to conclusions. You understand, we're not the same. And from now on, we'll be entirely different. From now on, we'll be happy. Besides, there's something that's going to change our lives." I don't understand. What are you driving at? I'm pregnant, Patrick. We're going to be parents. Marcia, do you have a fever? We've been apart for 2 years. You can't seriously expect to pin this child on me. Of course I didn't mean it in that way. I'm just speaking from pure emotion. Of course it's not yours. But what does that matter? You've always dreamed of having children. I'm sure you'll be the best father for him. How clever of you. What a brilliant plan. You're going to land yourself on my shoulders and have a father for your child. How fortunate to have such a fool in your pocket, who can be used at will. Patrick, you've misunderstood everything. I love you. That's enough, Marcia. I'm not the same fool as before. While I feel sorry for your child, I cannot help you. Please, don't contact me again. Patrick hurriedly left, shocked by her audacity. How could he have loved this woman? How could he have married her? Had he been blind to how manipulative and calculating his ex-wife was? How could she imagine he would welcome her back with open arms, along with another man's child? Even if she wasn't pregnant, Patrick wouldn't give her a second chance. As they say, never step into the same river twice. Once a betrayer, always a betrayer. Besides, Patrick's heart belonged to another now. Music had given him not just a new life, but new love. At one of his concerts, he'd met a woman and fallen in love at first sight, someone he dreamed of spending his life with. Marcia trembled with rage. Who did he think he was? How dare he speak to her that way? What had happened to that puppet she once controlled so easily? Her pride was wounded. She had planned everything so carefully, imagined how perfectly her future would unfold, and simply couldn't accept her plans crumbling. When she told her mother everything at home, the young woman faced harsh criticism. How did I raise such a foolish daughter with bird brains? You couldn't even manipulate this simpleton into marriage. What went wrong? He clearly hasn't forgiven you. You shouldn't have mentioned the baby right away. You're a woman. You need to be craftier. You should have won him back first, then brought it up. What a mess. He used to want children so desperately, was so persistent about it. I thought he'd be thrilled. Of course not. Even someone as gullible as your Patrick wouldn't willingly accept such a burden. Face it, you've lost. You've lost everything and robbed me of my only security in my old age. Are we all supposed to live in rental apartments now with a baby? No, Mum, don't worry. I won't give up. Marcia didn't share her mother's pessimism, though she might have been overconfident. She was convinced this wasn't the end. Such deep love as Patrick had for her couldn't simply vanish. Surely a spark remained, and from that spark she could reignite the flame. She just needed patience and persistence. She decided to observe her ex-husband discreetly. She wanted to understand his current life, his routines, his social circle, to develop a strategy. But her surveillance led to unexpected discoveries. Where does a typical man spend his weekend mornings? Some sleep until noon, others jog, meet friends, or shop. Yet Patrick went to an amusement park, an odd choice for a man in his 40s. His behaviour suggested he was waiting for someone. He paced anxiously, checking his watch repeatedly. Clearly he had an appointment, and whoever it was seemed to be running late. Suddenly, his face lit up with joy. Marcia froze as a laughing 5-year-old girl ran to Patrick. He scooped her up in his arms as she squealed with delight. A moment later, a young woman, dressed far too simply by Marcia's standards, joined them. She kissed Patrick, and the happy trio headed toward the Ferris wheel. Though Marcia couldn't make out her rival's features from afar, she didn't need to. Who was this nobody to stand in her way? How could Patrick prefer some plain Jane when he could have her? Blood rushed to Marcia's head. Blind with fury, she pushed through the crowd, grabbed Patrick's elbow, and began shouting throughout the park. "That's how it is! That's why you rejected me!" "Marcia, what do you think you're doing? Where did you come from?" "Shut up! You're in no position to ask questions. I left my pride and crawled to him on my knees, and he found someone else." "Don't shout. Don't embarrass yourself. Everyone's looking at us. You're scaring the child." "Oh yes, a child. So my baby is a stranger to you, but you hug another girl as if she were your own. Or am I missing something? Maybe you have a daughter out of wedlock. Maybe you've been lying to me all these years, leading a double life. Well, just wait until I deal with you and this... you. We..." Marcia shot an angry glance at the astonished woman who, stepping aside, tried to calm her crying daughter. The woman stood frozen, looking at each other as if seeing ghosts. "It can't be. Is that you?" was all Marcia could say. In Patrick's companion she recognised Leslie, her own sister, who was 2 years her senior. It had been over 10 years since Marcia had seen or heard from her sister. She never imagined fate would bring them together under such circumstances. Leslie's story paralleled Patrick's in many ways. Like him, she had loved music from childhood and dreamed of performing on stage. She too had faced resistance from their strict parents, who insisted on a more practical profession that would guarantee stability. But there was one significant difference between them. Unlike Patrick, Leslie refused to yield to pressure. At barely 18, she ran away from home to live life on her terms and prove her worth. She dreamed of returning home, triumphant years later, head held high, to share stories of her success. Leslie wanted nothing more than for her mother and sister to witness her achievements. She was certain she would become famous, with her music playing on radio and her face on TV. But these youthful dreams remained unfulfilled. Whether from insufficient talent, lack of dedication, or simple misfortune, everything went wrong from the start. Leslie failed to gain admission to music college, let alone the conservatory. The sensible choice would have been to return home, but pride prevented her. Instead, Leslie took a job as a waitress at a fast food restaurant and rented a tiny room from an elderly woman. She convinced herself these hardships were temporary, that her dreams would eventually come true. After joining an amateur band, she thought success was within reach. However, this rock group achieved little recognition. Their performances were limited to apartment parties with questionable crowds, typically ending in drunken brawls and police intervention. Leslie, never one for hooliganism, found no joy in these scenes, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave the band. Her reason for staying had little to do with artistic passion. She had fallen in love with Jake, the lead singer. Now she wondered how she ever found this coarse, lazy, rather plain male attractive. Back then, though, he seemed incredibly handsome and talented. She believed him to be her soulmate and was overjoyed when he left his girlfriend for her. Their relationship moved at lightning speed. Within 6 months they married, despite having no savings, no steady jobs, no proper income, no proper home, no family support, no security whatsoever. But this didn't deter them. They romanticized their poverty, imagining how rising from nothing would strengthen their bond. They dreamed of telling their grandchildren about overcoming adversity together. Reality proved different. In their marriage, only Leslie showed any drive or ambition. While she worked, attended music school, and maintained their modest rental, Jake drank, frequented dubious establishments, and pretended to be finding himself in creativity. He lived entirely off his wife's earnings, yet she continued loving and believing in him. Leslie's awakening came only with her pregnancy and Jake's subsequent abandonment of it. The man, fearing responsibility, fled while his wife was at work. She never saw or heard from him again. Now, Leslie shuddered at these memories. If it hadn't been for her landlady, she would have died. The lonely old woman sympathized with her tenant, having once been in a similar situation herself. She let Leslie live in the apartment for free, and when Leslie gave birth, she babysat her daughter Linda, as if she were her own granddaughter. It was thanks to this woman's help that Leslie finished her studies and made something of herself. Having no other family, the elderly woman eventually bequeathed her only property to her tenant. Still, Leslie and her daughter lived very modestly. Working as a music teacher in an ordinary school, Leslie barely earned enough for basic needs. She couldn't remember the last time she'd bought herself new clothes. Every penny went to her child, leaving nothing for herself. Realizing she couldn't continue like this, she began taking part-time work. She played violin at weddings, sang at anniversary celebrations, and performed at nightclub concerts. At one such event, she met Patrick, who had come to their city at a fellow musician's invitation. Leslie and Patrick's relationship began as a friendship. Neither planned for anything more at first, but plans are plans, and feelings are feelings. Though they rarely saw each other and mostly communicated online, their love flourished. Though Patrick had sworn never to fall in love or marry again, he now wanted to be a reliable husband to Leslie and a caring father to her daughter. Leslie initially hesitated to accept his proposal, but decided to take the chance. If it didn't work out, well, she was no stranger to disappointment. It couldn't be worse than with Jake. Something told her Patrick could be trusted. He was a decent man, and each day proved this more clearly. Patrick seemed like a reward for all her hardships and trials. She felt certain nothing could interfere with her happiness. That's why her sudden encounter with Marcia came as a complete shock. Though Leslie had never been close to her sister and hadn't seen her in ages, she felt troubled. Patrick, what happens now? Can we really live happily as if nothing happened? Why not? What's stopping us? Well, Marcia is my sister after all. She'll suffer. Her suffering is her own fault. But if your sister, you haven't seen in 10 years, matters more than our relationship, that's your choice. Marcia quickly realized she could manipulate Leslie's sisterly feelings. She nearly succeeded and even tried involving their mother, but that backfired. Their mother pretended to support her younger daughter while having her own agenda. Daughter, don't listen to Marcia or follow her lead. She doesn't know what she's doing. She cheated on her husband, left him, ruined her life and mine, and now she's angry. But you should get married and stop worrying. As for me, I have one favor to ask. What's that? When you marry Patrick and move out, let me have your apartment. Better yet, sign it over to me. I'm too old to be living in others' spaces. After consideration, Leslie returned to Patrick and agreed not only to marry him, but to follow him anywhere. This came at the perfect time, as he'd just received a 3-year work offer abroad and wasn't sure whether to accept. Now everything fell into place. Since Marcia wouldn't leave them in peace anyway, they'd feel more settled far away. Patrick and Leslie married quietly without celebration and soon departed, leaving their past behind. Though adjusting to the new country took time, they grew to love it so much they decided to stay. They planned to remain abroad, at least until Linda finished school. They didn't look further ahead, Knowing life's instability, everything could change instantly. Why fill their heads with uncertain plans when the present was good? As for Marcia, though initially furious and cursing her sister and ex-husband as traitors, she softened after having her son. Motherhood transformed Marcia into a kinder, gentler, more compassionate person. Her mother was shocked by the changes in her daughter. Even Marcia sometimes didn't recognize herself. However, after a while, she returned to her calculating and cunning nature. One day, Marcia learned that Raymond had returned to the city, apparently doing well with a new business and plenty of money. She was tempted to appear at his office with their child and create a scandal, embarrassing him in front of his employees and business partners. Instead, Marcia restrained herself. She decided to act more strategically. Marcia found a skilled family lawyer and filed a paternity lawsuit against her former lover. When Raymond received the summons, he stormed over to confront Marcia. "What is this nonsense? What games are you playing? You had a child with who knows whom, and now you're making demands? You're nothing but a con artist." "It's only you who is a con artist here. You're a man who ran away from his debts, thinking he'd get away with it. Now it's time to pay up. Thanks to my son, I'll see you fall." "Don't count on it. Neither you nor your child will get a penny. I have the best lawyers around." Marcia burst in laughter. "I can't wait to see you and your lawyers get in the puddle. Now, get out. I'm done talking." The DNA test confirmed Raymond as the biological father of Marcia's son. She successfully sued for substantial alimony, with the court granting her demands. She also sought compensation for emotional damages in a separate proceeding. Marcia felt triumphant. She and her child were now financially secure. Moreover, the boy was heir to considerable wealth. Since Raymond had no other children, the inheritance would be his alone. Though Raymond initially protested and tried to challenge the ruling, he eventually decided this might work in his favour. He had always wanted a son, and his ex-wife couldn't have children. He began to see the situation differently, motivated by both paternal feelings and practicality. After all, he wasn't getting any younger, and now someone could care for him in his old age. He decided to reconcile with Marcia, arriving at her door with flowers and gifts for his son. "Marcia, why don't we start afresh?" "Why should we?" "We share a history. A history better forgotten. I know I hurt you, but we could move past it for the child's sake." "I won't forget anything, even for the baby." "A boy needs his father." "He doesn't need a father who might betray and abandon him again. I'll find him a better daddy." Eventually, Raymond persuaded Marcia to marry him, but their happiness was short-lived. During their 2-year marriage, Marcia cleverly amassed a considerable sum in her bank account. Then she filed for divorce and successfully claimed half his assets in the settlement. Though Raymond regretted the financial loss, he found solace in the fact that his ex-wife didn't prevent him from seeing his son.